hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Natural Female Muscle Podcast. Today we are joined by Zena Al Kelaby. Zena has a bodybuilding journey that I am very, very excited to dig a little bit deeper into. Her success within bodybuilding has already been pretty incredible. She won multiple titles in her first year in 2020, which was pretty amazing, to be honest, for her first year of competing. She won the UKDFBA British Finals, the NFMUK Super Showdown, and the PCA International Open. So a really, really good first season for Zena, and she's since made some fantastic progress in her 3-year off season, I think you've had now. And she's recently just started her prep for her second season this year. But I think the most incredible part of this journey, alongside what you've achieved in bodybuilding, has also been what you've also accomplished and balanced alongside of that with work, because over several years you've worked towards becoming a vet, and in July, I believe it was last year, you became Dr Zena, and now time as a vet as well, which is absolutely amazing. So, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I just want to start by, saying thank you so much for hopping on, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to you about things a bit more.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited. But yeah,
you're very welcome. So I think for a lot of people I know will follow like Zena on Instagram, and you'll see where she's at now. You'll see the competitions that she's done and the success that she's had. But I'm sure a lot of people, like even myself, I don't really know the context that brought you into bodybuilding. Because like I said this on the first one as well, it's not something that a lot of people get into, bodybuilding as a female. And I'd be really interested to know what kind of actually brought you into the gym in the first place. And then we can kind of talk about what got you towards competing as well.
Yeah, cool. So basically, as with most people, I did sport before the gym. I was a competitive swimmer, and I did that pretty much I started swimming when I was like 3, but started competitive swimming when I was 11, and did that all the way till I was about 17 or 18. Swam for Wales, and my kind of goal with swimming was to go like all of the way. But unfortunately, like my head got the better of me with swimming, and it was kind of I was balancing A levels with like high level sport. I just missed like youth Commonwealth games, and it was just becoming like too much for me. So quit swimming at 17. And then I found the gym as just kind of like an escape from all of like the work I was doing in school. So I just went there, and like most people, had no idea. I literally just started doing like classes. Like I remember I'd go to like boxercise on a Tuesday, circuits on a Wednesday, and just literally run around in the hall and not have a clue. And then I'd always like come out and then like look at the weight section and walk past it and be like, that would be cool, but just never really had like the bravery to go in. And then I joined a different gym in Cardiff, and they taught me kind of like powerlifting. So your squat, bench, deadlift, and I was like, wow, I'm going to be a powerlifter. And so I kind of focused on that for a little bit, and then that's when I met Ethan. So Ethan's my boyfriend, for those that don't know, and Ethan has always been into bodybuilding. Pretty much since I can remember him telling me. And he always said that he was going to step on stage. And at that point, I remember saying to him, like, I would never, ever step on stage in a bikini. Like, I said to him, I was like, that is something I would never do. I was like, I'm going to be a powerlifter. And he was like, okay, whatever, just train hard and see where you go. So he kind of like taught me how to train properly, and taught me kind of just different lifts apart from your squat, bench, deadlift. And I also kind of then realized that I wasn't actually that strong at the functional lifts, and did actually enjoy training different muscles a lot more. So it all kind of went from there, really. That's where
like having someone in your corner. I see that with a lot of people's journeys, is like it's kind of an annoying one as females, because you think we want to do this all on our own, but sometimes we do actually meet somebody that kind of like transitions us from that process of like being scared to like go into like the weight room and take things a little bit further. So then I know Ethan's been like a massive part of your process as well, so that's really, really nice that he kind of brought you in like that as well. It's really interesting actually how you said that you like did a lot of competitive swimming before, and how that was actually something that you maybe found quite hard from a mental side of things? Because I'm guessing that was at a point when things were getting quite intense with you with like A levels and stuff, and
Yeah.
working really hard towards your goals and doing that alongside was difficult. But then actually transitioning over to the gym, did you find that that was actually better for your head compared to doing like the competitive swimming side of things?
Like, yes and no. I think a lot of people that have done like competitive sport will get this, but when I did swimming, like I felt complete. It was like my entire identity pretty much. And then when I stopped swimming, I also did competitive water polo as well, but swimming was like my main sport. I
Yeah.
felt just lost. And I think for like a number of years, I was just chasing that. You can't explain the feeling, but I was just chasing this feeling that I used to get from swimming. And I didn't get that from going to the gym, like the general gym. I didn't get it from kind of water polo. I didn't get it from doing these like gym classes. I tried CrossFit. I didn't get it from that. And it was until I kind of found bodybuilding, that's when I got the same feeling that I used to get when I used to swim. And I think that was the one part that I was like, I know this is the sport for me.
Yeah.
So like when I joined uni, I tried like 4 or 5 different sports. I tried rowing, I tried everything, and it was just like something was missing. But then as soon as I was like bodybuilding, it was I feel whole again, which is like really strange. You can't describe it, but you probably feel the same.
Yeah, I think that it's like you can't just do any sport and anything be like, oh cool, this has a competitive element, this will fill the hole. It's like
Yeah.
there's got to be something about it. And I think it's quite interesting because obviously swimming is, you do team aspects of it, but it is very much just about like you when you're in the water and you doing like your thing. And bodybuilding is also very much an individual sport, so it's like that focus for you and for
Yeah.
yourself rather than maybe like other people or other things as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's the aspect of kind of like everything you do affects it. And I kind of like that. And it's like every single decision that you make, every kind of training session you do, you work towards the kind of like a longer term goal, which swimming was like the race. Bodybuilding is like your shows, but you have so much progressions like inside that, like doing like in your training sessions in swimming, doing kind of like X amount of distance in X amount of time is like the best you've ever done. It's like it's very similar. Whereas when I tried to do rowing and things like that, it was just like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, like
But
where's the progress for that and what am I,
yeah,
so yeah. Did you find
yeah.
that worked quite well for you alongside obviously things picking up from a work side of things with the pressure of like A levels and uni? I mean, I don't know what actually got you into wanting to become a vet in the first place. I mean, feel free to share that because it's an interesting one. And I know nowadays everyone's like, oh, cool, you're a bodybuilder. I'm guessing you're an online coach as well, which
Yeah.
is not the case for everybody, because
No.
some people, they're really passionate about that and that's where they end up going down. But you can be passionate about bodybuilding and be passionate about other things too. And for you, I'm like, your love for being a vet must have come like a long way before that too. And the two clearly go really well hand in hand for you as well. But what was it that kind of like sparked that love for you and that passion for you within being a vet too?
So it's a really boring answer. Like it's all I've ever wanted. Like people say that and like it's like, oh yeah, okay. But like genuinely, like my parents tell me like since I could talk, I always used to say like, oh, I want to treat animals. Like when you have a kid in the family and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like the only thing that I ever said was, I want to be a vet. Like, I don't know, it's just that's all I've ever wanted. So for me, that was kind of like it's never really been like a decision. And I think it's easier than a lot of people because growing up through school, I knew what I wanted, so I knew what I needed to do. Through like A levels, I knew what I wanted, I knew what I needed. So it wasn't ever like, oh, I have to kind of like find something, or it wasn't like I'm gonna do this until I know. For me, it was just like that was always just one straight path. And
Yeah.
then sport was like a parallel path, but kind of a path that I was willing to like change around and experiment with. But as with like my career, that was just one that like I never really had to think about. It was just like guaranteed almost. And then yeah, I'd actually got into uni when I met Ethan and started bodybuilding. So I was already at uni. It was in I think it was the end of first year. That all started. So yeah, it was kind of nice because I had my first year of uni and then I wanted to be a bodybuilder. So which was
Yes.
good.
It's nice though, because it does show how like they both kind of come in together nicely for you, especially. And then it's kind of
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people are like, oh, you either have your career or you have like your hobbies or you have these different things, and you can have both. And like I think that's what also makes us like who we are as well, is not just our career and not just our hobbies. It's like all these things together that we enjoy at the same time. But it does really show how you still have that competitive like aspect for yourself, because you said you kind of started bodybuilding and you were like enjoying it and going to the gym and having fun, but then what like really flicks that switch for you? Because I know you said you previously had that competitive aspect, but what was it that then was like, okay, I want to compete. I'm going to go from the girl who said I'm never going to get on stage in a bikini to like, this is what I want to do. And like, how did you actually go about that process?
Do you know what? I was trying to think about this on my drive this morning, like when you're in the car and you're like, because I knew I'd chat about this today. And I
Yeah.
was like, I don't actually know the like switching point. It was almost like there was me going from, oh, I never ever want to ever stand on stage. And then the next thing I can remember was I'd signed up with a coach, but it wasn't quick. It was like it was a long time. And I think for me, it was kind of like, I never wanted to kind of step on stage. But then being with Ethan, training the way that Ethan did, being kind of like following the people Ethan did on Instagram, like these big bodybuilders, just kind of immersing myself more in the sport made me think, okay, like it's not just people standing on stage in a bikini. There's so much more to it. And then I think for me, it was kind of like I just trained with Ethan. So I just did whatever he did in the gym. And then I started kind of like following people more, watching more YouTubes. And I was like, you know what? Like, I could actually do that. So then I think it was just like a natural kind of like, oh, okay, this is what it's about. So yeah, it wasn't like a one day then the next, but also there wasn't a particular thing that changed my mind.
Yeah, it was just a very like gradual, like natural process, which is like
Yeah.
interesting because I actually feel very similar about the way it was for me. Like there was never just a day where I was like, okay, cool, I want to compete now. It just happened.
Yeah.
I can't really like explain why. But that's I think why it was maybe like so right for you, because it wasn't forced. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I've seen X on Instagram and like now I need to be like her and I need to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, this is cool. I can do this. And it just naturally happened. Um, and I know like in that first season, so you ended up going for the figure division, which I think was very clear based on the structure that you have. Because if anyone who's listening to this like hasn't seen Zena's physique, like built like an X-frame. So there
No,
wasn't.
I didn't want to do figure when I started. So like not many people know this actually, but I wanted to prep the year before that I did. So in 2019, I got my first coach, and I was like, right, I think we were like 10 or 12 weeks out from the show, and I signed up with this coach. I was like, right, can you prep me? We're going to do a first timers show in like June or whatever. Ethan told me, Zena, it's not a good idea. He was like, why don't you just wait a year? Actually, learn a bit more about yourself, learn a bit more about the sport. He was like, you're not ready yet mentally. And I was like, yeah, I am. And I'm very stubborn. So if someone says wait, I say no. And at the time, I didn't realize that he genuinely had my best interests at heart. I was just like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I signed up with a coach in 2019 March time, and I was like, we're doing a show in June or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I literally did like 3 or 4 weeks with the coach, and I was just in an absolute mess. Like it was awful. Just like mentally, physically, just kind of just not in a good place. I
Yeah.
hated it. And then I ended up getting really, really ill. So that kind of nipped that in the bud. And then I realized that actually maybe I wasn't ready to prep. So then I took like a few months away from a coach. And then that kind of November is when I re-got a coach for the following year. But yeah, that was what kind of one I just pushed to the side.
I never knew that though. I never
No,
that's really interesting. But
yeah, it's kind of one where I was like, wow, that was silly. And I'm so glad it didn't go past like 2 weeks, because it was just a ridiculous decision. But that prep would have been like for bikini, because that's where that coach thought my physique was. And then when
looking for
I
like a PCA show or something for that.
yeah, I didn't really know kind of much else at that point, but it would have just been like PCA.
Yeah.
And then when I kind of then realized like no, I needed time, I still was kind of in my head like I need to be bikini because I don't have that much muscle. And then, yeah, it was kind of clear that when I started posing, I wasn't a bikini athlete. Like my shoulders and like my shape just isn't from swimming, I think. But yeah, that's another story for you.
And then did you take some time with your coach before you then started that prep in 2020? Because you said you
Not
November.
yeah, not as long as I should have really. I'd never really been in a surplus with my calories. They were just kind of like at maintenance. And then we started working together. I think it was just the end of December, and we had about 10 or 12 weeks before we prepped. Which now looking back, like I maybe should have started sooner, but I don't think it negatively impacted me because at that stage, like I'd already kind of been in the sport a little while. I knew a little bit about my body. So it worked out okay. But yeah,
You
I mean,
still had good training experience at that point, and I think that's the difference is, yeah, like you can always say start with a coach sooner, and ultimately if you build a good relationship with a coach, it does help. But
yeah,
if you've only been training for like 6 months, that's when you're going to run into problems in a prep. But when you've been training, you'd still been training for like what, a few years by that
yeah,
point. So
exactly.
you have still got a baseline to build on, and your experience, you know your body, and you're like, you can work with a coach and give them that feedback. And you'd worked with a coach before and knew what wasn't good for you.
Yeah.
So you kind of could communicate that a little bit better. And I think that's like blessings in disguise, like a little bit, when you like go through that first prep and you're like, oh, okay, this is not good. But then you can then channel that into something and make that next experience so much better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So like when I started, I felt like I was in a good spot. Like obviously when you do your first prep, you're never gonna be in like the most amazing spot condition wise because you've never been lean before. So I think like starting this time round, obviously I look significantly different, but then I have been lean before. So you just hold fat differently. You probably know as well, like taking photos now, like from when you started your first prep, like you do just look different. So as like a first prep starting point, like I think it was fine.
No, it really, really was.
Yeah.
Like, you were in a good position, and everyone knows like you came down and you had a good amount of muscle there, which
Yeah.
now is only just like tripled in size. So
Well, hopefully. We don't know.
like how actually like was that first prep for you? Because I mean, obviously it came out like with a really successful like result, but how was it in terms of like the experience managing it? And especially at that time you were at uni, correct? It was also the year of COVID because it was
Yeah.
2020. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, how was that whole experience for you?
Do you know what? Like, I think I'm the abnormality in this, and I do think this year is going to be very different. But 2020 prep for me, like, it was perfect. Like, it sounds really stupid, but like, if you could like write a prep on paper of like someone's body weight, and then every like 3-4 weeks you reduce their carb by 25 grams, and their body weight keeps moving, like, my body was just like, yes, we understand the assignment. I hate myself for it almost because like it was I think credit to myself, like I did everything that I was asked to do, like every single thing. Like I've never had a meal plan, so I was on macros, but like my macros are always perfect, like to the gram. So that's obviously an aspect of it, but like for me, like each week we'd either, if we'd make a change, it would be either food or cardio. And my body weight just kind of, it just went down like perfectly, and we never really had like any areas of like sticking points. We never really had any areas of like me feeling shit. Like I was still like my closest friends and ask Ethan, like that prep, like I would be 3-4 weeks out still bouncing off the walls. I don't know how. I think COVID actually helped me though because I wasn't stressed about anything. I could do uni from home. Like everything was, yeah, it was a good prep. So for me, it was good. I know a lot of people have very different experiences, and obviously everyone's very different. But like for me, like that prep it was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it really interesting from like a COVID side of things, because as much as like the gyms were shut and that sucked, like the benefit was that if you were at uni or if you were working, like it actually pulled off so much stress.
It
Like
did. Yeah.
I prepped in that year as well, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I can just do my uni at the time I need, and then I have all day to do my
Yeah.
steps, my cardio, and my session, and it kind of made it a lot easier in that sense. But I think that because you are like clearly so organized regardless, I think that you've probably like just set that baseline and that prep of being like, yeah, cool, I actually know what I need to do. And now I just channel that on top of, you know, what I'm doing now. And like, do you maybe feel like a little bit nervous about the fact you've got a bit more to manage with this prep ahead? Or do you, because ultimately I can imagine the past 6 months has been a lot for you to kind of get used to, with like going from being like a student and being like, oh, okay, I'm actually a vet now and I'm actually doing this, and now managing that alongside going into this prep ahead.
Yeah, I think like obviously it'll be 3 years off the stage, and the entire time like I have been kind of like, how is it going to be like next time? And I think because my 2020 prep was, it was very simple, like there was nothing really to factor in. It was just kind of like, it was just like a simple prep. I always knew this one would be more challenging. From like the perspective like you're saying, like I have so many almost just more responsibilities now, and I think being responsible for kind of like literal like animal lives, it does make it a lot more stressful. With if you're having like a low energy day and you make like a one wrong drug calculation, like you can kill something, and like that scares me a lot. So for me it's kind of like I just need to be very like careful and organize my time a lot better. But it, yeah, like I would be lying if I said I wasn't nervous for like how it's going to be later on in the year. But I think our approach this year is kind of like try and get a lot of fat off quickly and then push food back in, which I'm sure we'll like talk about later. But yeah, I am a lot more nervous this year because of more things to do. But at the same time, kind of like now I have a job, it's a lot easier to organize my time because you, as you probably know in uni, like your days are just like everywhere. And then you come home and you still have stuff to do and you still have kind of like things to finish or emails to do and things. But like for me, like once I'm finished, which actually really helps because I found like I can actually switch off in the evenings a lot better now. And I don't carry like my work home. So it's like pros and cons really. It's just, I think it's just going to be different.
Yeah, but you've like, I think you've already shown that it is so manageable, with the fact that this past phase of your off season has been so successful, and you've already done a pre-prep diet that was really successful. And I think that the only thing that changes, like as we know, is you're going to have to do a bit more, you're going to eat a bit less, and you're probably going to feel a bit more tired at points. Yeah. But as long as you're organized, like you'll be fine. And you're so hardworking anyway, like you'll have no problems. But it is like, it's just life at the end of the day, isn't it? And I think that people always think that how on earth are you going to train and do all these other things if you don't have, you know, basically either no work and you just don't work, or you're a student or something, or you're an online coach and you have more time, which at the end of the day is still a job. But like in a job like this, you know, it's still doable to do other things outside of that. And I think a lot of people will really appreciate seeing that across, you know, this year. And I think that you'll have more, almost like you say, you'll have more structure to your days because they're the same. And you know that, yeah, you might have like, I'm sure you'll have like different surgeries and things that adds stress on certain days compared to others, but at the same time it is more consistent. You don't need to worry about there being like a deadline for an assignment, or it'd be worse doing it when you're in like your final years. And I'm sure that's maybe played like a role on you prepping this year versus previous years. Did you kind of time that because you knew it was going to work well for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think when I stepped off stage in 2020, it was always for me, like, I always knew it would be 2023. Just purely for the fact that I didn't want to prep the same year as my finals. And not just from like a revision perspective, but also just a life perspective. I knew kind of like that year, like, I would be graduating, I would be starting my first job, like, I'd want to go on holiday with my friends, like, just genuinely just wanted to live that year as just like enjoyment rather than kind of being stressed about dieting and prepping. Like I knew like if I needed to diet whilst doing my finals, like I probably could have managed it, but it was the other things. It was just kind of like I just wanted to enjoy a year where I could just say yes to things because I'm quite strict on myself and I feel like you'll be the same and you know what you can and can't do and get away with. But for that year, for me, I think having like 2 years of COVID at uni, like I just wanted to just have fun, and I did. And like I did my finals without stress. I like said yes to going for food with my friends. I went on holiday with one of my friends. Like I could enjoy graduation with like my family and things like that. And it was just such a big moment for like life rather than putting bodybuilding on top of that. And I only really saw it as a positive in like bodybuilding perspective, because it's an extra year to grow. It's an extra year to kind of like learn more about myself and things like that. So, and the same reason as like you, like we bodybuild because we love training, and it's like another year is actually fine. And if someone said to me like, you can't get on stage this year, I'll be like, okay, I'll get on stage next year. Like it's like actually fine.
And
Yeah,
years, like especially like you're still like so young as well, like more years
yeah,
kind of benefit you, like if you need to take them. So like that is definitely a really good message for people who are at uni or have other things in their career going on, because I think a lot of people feel pressured to like compete within a given time frame because somebody says, oh, you're ready, you can compete. But if you've got other things going on, like if you've got finals, if you've got assignments, if you want to go away with your boyfriend or with your family and just enjoy being a little bit younger for a while, like enjoy that. Because I actually wish that I maybe did a little bit more of that as well. And I'm really like, I'm not pushy on my clients, but I can tell that sometimes my clients think, oh, maybe I should be more strict with this because, you know, I want to bodybuild. And I'm like, no, it's cool. Like you can go away with your friends and have fun and do these things, and please do it, because bodybuilding is always going to be there. So like enjoy these moments that you can't get back. Like you couldn't get back your graduation. You couldn't get back these moments that only ever happen once. So it's important that you set time out to enjoy them when you can ultimately enjoy them.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah. I want to just like pull it back a little bit, because I know I kind of just skimmed over the fact that you obviously like won 3 massive shows in that year in 2020. What actually was your like reaction to that? Because I know that you like didn't really have many expectations, I don't think, going into that prep. I don't know if you did have any expectations, but like how was that experience for you in terms of maybe how you felt going into those shows, what you thought was going to happen, and then what you actually got coming out the back end of it?
Yeah. So this will probably make you laugh. My my first show was like the first show I'd ever been to. I'd never even watched a show before. So like I had no idea. Like I'd never even watched a show. So I didn't even know what an eye walk was. Like I didn't know anything. I just was like I was this little like baby figure athlete that was lean. I had my sparkly bikini, but I had no idea what else to do. Like I didn't even practice a walk before I got on stage. I remember being at Ultraplex like 2 weeks before and thinking, oh, I actually have to walk in these heels, not just pose. Like it was actually just like thinking back now, like the naivety I had was kind of just like blissful, because I genuinely didn't have a clue. All I knew was that I needed to get lean and stand on stage. But I think it helped me because like I had no pressure on myself. I had no expectations for myself. Obviously I wanted to win, like who doesn't? But it wasn't like I didn't even think about it. And I think you'll probably feel the same with COVID year, that the like unpredictability of it was kind of just like, for me, all I wanted was stand on stage. That was it. Like if I could just stand on stage and just like get there, I would be happy, because my shows got cancelled and moved 4 weeks later. I'm not sure about your Two Bros one. Did that change?
6 weeks on, I ended up like prepping
Yeah.
for 8 weeks because of it. And I was like, I don't care. I don't care when it happens. I just get on stage because I've been prepping for like 30 weeks now.
Yeah. So like I obviously stood on stage. My first one was like 4 weeks later than it should have been. And I was just like,
UKDFBA finals, was that the first one that you did?
PCA was first. Yeah, yeah. So and I did like 3 consecutive peak weeks. So it was one, then the other, then the other. But yeah, for me it was just like the whole time I was like, it could literally be cancelled at any second. All I wanted was just to stand on stage once. I was like, just want to get on stage and then I'll be happy. So I think yeah, for me I had like no expectations apart from I just want to get on stage. So it was nice. And then the UKDFBA was the weekend after, and each consecutive show I did feel like slightly more pressure for myself, because obviously I'd been on stage, I'd won a show, and I was like, oh shit, like maybe I actually, should actually have like goals for the next one. But yeah, I would genuinely was just grateful to be on stage. Like that's what I could say for that year. And you probably felt the same.
Yeah, definitely. I think it, because even though like, for example, in my prep, like I didn't come out with like an amazing result, which to be fair, I didn't expect with what I was doing and where I was at. But I think no matter what the result is, it kind of teaches you a lot about enjoying the process and appreciating it more, because you realize that you actually, yes, you obviously a result would be amazing, but you're like, I actually just want to get on stage and I actually just want to display this and I want to show how much I love like bodybuilding and show this. And it helps you to take away that pressure, and it helps you to take away the like stress of what's going on like social media, what other people are doing or what people look like at qualifiers even, I bet, because have qualifiers. So because it was just like this one opportunity, it's like, cool, I have this one opportunity, let's just go and have fun. And I'm sure that's just like taught you so much that although going into this next year it will be so different, like you still are the same Zena that can carry that same mindset into those shows and be like, cool, this is just an experience for me to really enjoy and show everything. And ultimately you'll be in a better position all round as well anyway, so you have so much more confidence to take into those with you. But yes,
you think that, but I have way less confidence now. But I think it's because you're just like, no, don't you?
No, I know. And I was going to ask you like how you really feel going into this season with the fact that you are like defending the titles. Like, how does that feel like going in? Because ultimately, I think for you, like you look at your season and you look at your off season, you're like, this girl has made so much progress. Like she's taken 3 years away from the stage. She's made an amazing amount of progress. She's coming back a massively improved athlete, which ultimately, as a bodybuilder, as we always say, like that's all we can ever do. But you can't deny that you know that you've won something before. And like, how does that feel for you then going into the season? How are you actually like managing that and going in mentally into the season too?
Yeah, so I think it's a hard one, and it's definitely like a roller coaster of emotions for sure. Like some weeks I find myself thinking like that I have pressure on myself, but that was kind of more towards the end of like my off season where I would overthink it. I would put like so much pressure on like myself and my prep, and it got to the point where I was like, I don't even know if I want to prep anymore, because I would be thinking about it and I'd be like, what if I let people down and all of that. But after chatting with Brian kind of like at the start of prep, and we kind of just like put a few things like in order, and it was, I feel like now I'm very different in my mind, and it's kind of like I don't feel any pressure anymore, because at the end of the day, like I know when I get back on stage, like I'm literally going to present the best thing that I can present, and like nothing else is in my control, and that I'm actually okay with that. And I think it definitely comes with like maturity in the sport and as a person and as an athlete. But I feel like now it's kind of just like I literally can't control who turns up, and I'm okay with that. And if there is a better athlete on the day, I'm actually okay with that. And even though kind of like in 2020 on my shows, like I was kind of first on that day, it's like it doesn't mean that if I come second, third, fourth this year round that I'm worse. It just means that there's better people. And it's definitely going to be kind of like mixed emotions the whole prep, but obviously everyone preps and they want to win, but like I just need to focus on kind of like I can only do what I can do, and I think putting pressure on myself is going to just make me look worse. So I don't know, it's a strange one. I feel like content with the fact that I'm just going to give what I can and just let the rest do what it needs to do.
I think you can like go into it with the fact that, you know, like I said, you have that confidence that you've put the work in, you know that you have the potential because you've won it before, and like no matter what, you have potential as a bodybuilder within this sport. And then just keep working, like that's all you need to do, and keep enjoying it and getting what you can get out of it. And it's so weird, and this is the thing that I say to clients and like I say to AJ and like other people all the time, how like you say with the placings, it's like you're first on that day, but you could be in another lineup and you could be like fifth in that lineup, or you could be fifth in a certain lineup and be in another lineup and be first. And it's just it's so just dependent on what happens. I think sometimes like the more that we wrap our heads around that a little bit, like you said, with just maturing and having more time in bodybuilding, that you start to understand that it's more than that. Of course, on the day, sometimes that kind of just like goes in one ear and out the other. But I think always being able to like come back to that within your process when you do have those moments of like beating yourself up about things. And I think the fact that you've pulled things together in such a good way with like Brian as well is like amazing. And for anyone who like doesn't know, obviously Zena like started working with 3DMJ. When was that you actually started working with them?
Summer, like August, I think we
Yeah, because
started.
I spoke to you about it at the
Yeah.
and that's obviously a really different direction that you've kind of taken in this prep, because you were being coached by Ethan pretty much, I think, in your off season.
Yeah, like kind of mixed. He looked over every decision that I made for myself. So he would kind of like do my training. Then anytime I kind of thought, right, okay, like I need to up my food or anything, I'd say, oh, I think I'm gonna up my food. He'd be like, yeah, or no, you're fat, diet, you know? So it was kind of like mutual, but like he definitely kept me on like a nice track. So yeah.
Did you find that quite nice? Because obviously it wasn't making you feel like you were having to be like checking in with a coach every week, but you still had that accountability from someone. And like with it being Ethan as well, I'm sure that was actually really nice and a really supportive like network for you to have with him being your partner too. Because I know a lot of people actually find that harder. Like I speak to a lot of people who say they'd find it harder to talk about bodybuilding related things with their partner or their significant other. Did you actually find that a nice process to kind of go through with Ethan as well?
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, we always said from like the moment in 2020 where I decided that I was going to go without a coach that I wouldn't be prepping with him. For me, like that just was never gonna happen. I didn't want to it's more the fact that I'm stubborn, and if he tells me something, I don't really listen. I just do what I want to do anyway. So for like off season, it worked really well because like he could kind of help me with my training, but also just like I would run a decision past him, and he knows that if I said something, I was gonna do it anyway. But it's nice just to like have his input, and kind of like if I wanted to increase food or whatever like that, he'd be like, maybe consider this, and I would consider it, but then still do what I wanted to do anyway. So for prep, I knew like that would never work, but
Yeah.
like you said, for off season, like it was perfect for me because I didn't feel any pressure. I didn't feel like if one week I didn't want to, like, I didn't put my bikini on for like 2 or 3 months at one point just because I was so focused on just like training performance. It just didn't need to, and I just didn't really want to. And I think if I had a coach at that point, I would have just got stressed. And I think by that point as well, like I knew how to train hard, I knew what I needed to do. So yeah, it worked really, really well. But the plan was always to like get a coach a few months before prep, and we both knew that. So that took the kind of decision out of it for me, really.
I think that's really interesting how you also like took times in your off season to not like put your bikini on and overanalyze your physique. And I actually do the same now as well, where every now and then I'll kind of look at myself and I know I need to. And I think that's the benefit of you having a good eye for your physique and Ethan also having a good eye for your physique as well, where you kind of know when you need to make those changes. Of course, like
Yeah.
athletes do really need a coach to check in with on a weekly or fortnightly basis, where they are able to see their physique more frequently in off season, because they couldn't see those things or feel those things that they need to in the gym. But for the most part, like being able to actually just focus on your performance and what you're doing rather than how you're looking in an off season makes a huge difference to like your longevity and your ability to actually like keep pushing, keep growing and enjoying it and having fun, rather than like so many girls will check in or every week or look at their pictures and analyze their pictures every week in an off season, be like, I either don't look different, or I look too fat, or I need to diet, or this and that. And I constantly will actually sometimes even tell my clients to like go for a few weeks without taking pictures, or to take them, upload them and delete them, because they will just like look at them and overanalyze them. Like you don't need to do that at this point in time. And I think like you were actually always somebody that like even I looked at too in my off seasons, and I'd be like, Zena looks like she's just getting after it and she's growing and she's making progress, and I need to do that. Because like in my 2020 in 2021, I ended up dieting for like 18 weeks or something. Like I don't know how it happened. So I had to know how it happened.
One of those things.
And
I remember we started dieting at the same time, I think, because I remember messaging you and being like, my body weight is really stubborn. I remember you saying yours was stubborn. What's happening? And you were just like, mate, I don't know.
yeah, I don't know what happened that year. I think I ended up dieting for ages because AJ was prepping. And for some reason, I think like I just got lost in his season and I didn't know what was going on. But even in those phases, like I was getting annoyed because I was like, I'm not growing right now. Like, what am I doing? And I'd be like, oh, maybe I'm too soft with this and that. And sometimes you just need to like just focus on what you need to do in that phase. And I think it'll be refreshing for a lot of people to hear that like you really did a great job at doing that, and like your physique, your training, everything really progressed a lot across that off season as well.
Yeah, definitely. It was actually kind of strange because I when I signed up with 3DMJ, me and Ethan made like a timeline from like 2020 to that day and like went through like each month and put like average calories, average body weight, and like macros every single month between like 2020 and 2022. And it's actually like, I didn't spend that many weeks in a deficit, but I also didn't really spend that many like weeks in like a massive surplus either. And a lot of it, the bulk of it was kind of just like a good amount of calories and a good amount of training, which looking back, like I was like, maybe I could have done like bigger pushes up and bigger pulls down. But for me, it actually kind of just worked nicely just to keep
Yeah.
my calories like ticking over and just like getting training performance better.
Yeah.
But obviously we had the problem as well of the second lockdown just as we were coming out of like our thing. So out of our like post prep period. So that was another like setback, which was just a bit shit.
How did you find that like out of the prep? Did you struggle post that prep with like training or body weight, or what was it at that point in time?
So we our post prep was fine. Like I worked calories back up quite well. But when we did go into that like second lockdown, I didn't train. I was like, I can't do it again. Like obviously throughout the first lockdown, prep was like my sole driver to get those sessions in the garden with like shitty little weights. But the second lockdown, I don't even remember how long it was like a month or something. I didn't train that entire time, and my body weight did go up, which was kind of like a bit annoying because like it wasn't like productive body weight, it was just fat. So I do think it probably delayed like quite a lot of things, and it meant that I had to diet sooner than I would have wanted to, but it's one of those things.
You do what you have to do, and a lot of people like come to the second lockdown like we're just like, I'm so done. I'm so
Yeah.
done with this because it had been so long. We all like oh my god, we're being let out, and then they were like, no, you're going back in.
No. Yeah.
But I think the fact that you actually came out of that, and for the majority, like you said, within your off season, whilst you weren't necessarily in like a massive surplus, you weren't in a deficit either. And
Yeah.
I have found so much merit in that for like, I mean, for any athletes, but especially natural athletes, where if we like diet and we have to do extended diets like frequently, it takes a lot for us to come out of that. Everyone's very different. Like some people find that genetically they can kind of hover in and out of deficits and like they're all good, no problems. But a lot of females, especially, will notice that they sometimes go into a deficit, no matter how long it is. It can be like 6 to 8 weeks, and sometimes it just takes them a while to come out of it. And they find that they maybe waste a bit of time, either coming down too soon or trying to push up when they're just not, their body doesn't want to be pushed. And really, you can just hold at a body weight where you're strong in the gym, where you can still eat, you still feel okay on the day-to-day basis, you're having fun, you're progressing, like you'll still build some muscle there, and you'll be way, 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 way more beneficial, like spending more time there in your off seasons rather than thinking you need to aggressively push and aggressively pull back constantly. Like they have their benefits at like different points, but I think that you would rather look back at your off season and be like, I actually, spent a good amount of productive time there, just getting strong and holding that spot, which I think shows in your physique as well.
Oh, hopefully.
It does. But like you obviously then went and entered that like pre-prep phase. How did that all like go for you? And also how was that decision for you moving over to work with 3DMJ? Because they also operate, like from what I know, on a very different like basis, especially compared to what you did in your last prep, and just with the way that like they plan out the prep timelines and how they also manage training as well, because they do work on an RIR based approach too. How did you end up working with them, because you'd never really worked in that like format before, especially with training? So how did you come around to like making that decision, and how has that actually been for you as well?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a strange one actually. It's a bit of a rogue decision. Probably quite a lot of people would have thought. But for me, like throughout my whole time in off season, I was just kind of like watching, because I knew that I wanted another coach for prep. So I spent a long time looking at coaches, how they kind of like portray themselves on social media, but also their clients. I think that for me was the biggest thing, is like just looking at what they're presenting. And I remember like a few shows last year, early on, so kind of like early qualifiers, I'd like go to the shows and like look at the athletes, and like I'd see who their coaches were and see kind of like if that was something that I would want to work with. And I tossed about like so much. I really, it was a really hard decision. Like it was so difficult, and I had like 3 or 4 people in mind. And my problem was I didn't want to have a consultation with someone and then say to them like no. So I had to kind of like almost decide before I kind of messaged anyone. So anyway, it came to the decision where me and Ethan both agreed that 3GMJ probably would be a good shout for me. Like you said, they've got very successful history of preps. But also for me, I really just like the way they balance like people's lives with the prep. And for me, being kind of someone that does a lot of things outside of bodybuilding career wise, I knew that they would be able to kind of relate to me with that. So anyway, I went through their application process. I didn't look too much into like the training side and their approaches at that stage. But when me and Brian got paired together, I spent the first mesocycle that he sent doing it his way. In his consultation call, he kind of said the way that they would work and things like that. And I was like, I will do whatever you think for this one, and then we'll find like a happy medium. And he was very on board with that. And I said to him, kind of like, this is what I'm used to. This is how I train. I train to failure. I train X, Y, and Z, push pull legs, and he was this end of the spectrum. So kind of like complete opposite, very, very different, even just kind of like different split. So for the first like 8 weeks, I did exactly how he said, and there was definitely some benefits for me. I found myself stop comparing to other people on social media, which was a really big thing at that stage. I think last summer I started getting in my head of looking at other people's lifts and thinking like, oh, I'm not as strong as them and things like that. And I was then going into my sessions with like such a negative attitude. So that kind of
you were often like going into a lift and you were thinking, so and so does this, and
yeah,
it would kind of get in your head a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like, oh, they're lifting more than me, so they're going to be better than me on stage. Like, how dumb is that? Like, that's so silly. Exactly. So I think that was a really good like thing for me to do at that stage, because it completely switched my training focus to just do it his way. But then after that kind of first thing, it was more of like, right, I really miss training to failure because I miss the way it makes me feel. And part of the reason like I like bodybuilding is because I want to like push myself to that like horrible place. So Brian was really on board with kind of just finding like a happy place. And now we have a really nice like balance of kind of some sets are 1 to 2 RIR, and then the next set will be to failure and things like that. So my training's pretty much back to as I liked it. And then the prep approach is how kind of like he structured it. And that is just a much longer prep, which I'm okay with. It's just kind of like a lot slower. But yeah, it's different. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, like this is so different to what I know. And comparing it to my last prep, like my food is already lower than it ever got on my last prep, which is mad to me. But the kind of like timeline is that food will go back in. So I just have to trust it, and I trust him. So different, but I'm willing to try.
That's how they tend to like quite like to do it at 3DMJs. They'll diet you for like longer, but then you have more of the horrible part of the diet kind of like earlier, and then to actually feed back up and feel a little bit better later on. So it's just like it's different ways of doing it. But like when you've never done that before, especially in your position, you're like, my food is here now, like how am I going to get there at that point? And it's just there's so many different ways to do these things, like 5 and 5 equals 10, but like 8 and 2 also equals 10.
Exactly.
Like there's so many different ways that you can make that like equation happen and get to that end goal. And I think that especially for you in your situation, I think it was really, really smart how you acknowledge that you are in a different spot to where you were last time. So as much as we spoke about, last time the prep was great because you would like at uni, but just kind of managing things really chill, and there wasn't much of a physical demand. Whereas like now you are like a vet and you are like having to go into work and you are having to look after animals and cognitively focus a lot, but also physically focus a lot on what you're doing too. So taking that approach like within the prep, but also within your training is probably something that like I've even already seen through the stuff that you post on your Instagram with your stories and your training. It looks like your approach both mentally and physically with training seems much better. Like, of course, you sometimes have days where it's like doesn't feel great, like we all do. Yeah. But a lot of the time you train like really early in the morning as well, don't you, before you go to work?
Yeah, that's another thing that switched actually from uni. Is like in uni I'd always train at kind of like 8 p.m. maybe, and then finish the gym at like 10. Take a stim pre at 8 o'clock in the evening and go to bed and whatever. But like since I've started this job, like I train at like 5 or 6 in the morning. More so because it's almost like then I don't spend the whole day thinking about my session. And that for me was really important because I didn't want to be at work kind of stressing about I've got to go to the gym later and do this lift, or I don't have to go to the gym later and do this. It was kind of like I wake up, I go to the gym, my session's done, and then I focus on work. And once work's done, I can relax. And for me, that works so much better. And like you kind of just get used to it. I think from swimming as well, like I'm used to just training whenever I have to. And because it's different all of the time, like you don't get in like this, I would so much prefer training at this time. You just kind of like don't think about it anymore.
So many people like feel like they're disadvantaged because they don't get to train at like the middle of the day, or they don't get to train at like a specific time that they think is like most optimal for you to progress. No, like if you have to train at a different time to get it done, you can still get it done and you can still have a good session. And like at the end of the day, if you need to do it at that time, like you need to do it at that time. So like that just because like one bodybuilder trains at this time of the day, that's when you have to train. Like you'll find when works best for you and you'll adapt to training at that time, and you'll start to get the best sessions. Like I'm sure the first sessions that you started doing early in the morning were like maybe a bit of a shock to the system, but then after a little while you're just like, oh, this is just my routine and I'm kind of used to this now.
Yeah, exactly. And like I've also changed to a 7-day split now. So for me, like it's like the same every week. Like I know a Tuesday morning I'm going to get up and do the exact same upper session. So like comparatively wise, it's really nice as well because every Tuesday it's the same session, every Thursday it's the same session, and then my sessions on the weekend are always the same and they're always in the middle of the day. So it's kind of just like that, having a 7-day split when you are doing that is actually really useful because I know I can always have like my weekend sessions as like my big sessions where I like, like take a lot longer in the gym, like I have my bigger movements and things like that. And then my weekday sessions, like they're always the same and they're movements that I can do at that time, and like the progressions are based on the same like session. So like for me, like that was another adjustment that I've made, which has definitely helped.
It's such a smart approach to take, is going from a rolling split to a weekly split when you are going to perform so much better knowing what set days you need to do. Like for most people that I coach that have jobs that are kind of on most days, or they need that weekly like structure to be able to approach it better, both physically and mentally, makes such a huge difference. So I'm really glad that that's been something that's like worked a lot better for you as well. But like, have you found that the balance, you guys have obviously found a balance of the RIR approach that works well for you? Like firstly, would you be all right to like talk me through it a little bit, because it is something that I find really interesting? And secondly, like has that also been something that's maybe helped you a bit more to manage fatigue in a way that you've maybe never done in the past, and like combining that with work, has that worked a lot better for you?
Yeah, so I'm actually just gonna get a session up on my phone because I feel like it'll be easier to talk through it at the same time. For me, definitely like when we switched from like full RIR training to like full failure training, like I needed a deload after like 3 or 4 weeks. Like it was ridiculous. So Brian kind of was like, I'm happy to do it kind of your way, but at the same time, like we are not deloading every 4 weeks. So now we have like a happy medium. So for example, my I'll go for my leg session. It starts off, so we also switch the order around a little bit. So he would always like to start with a compound, but I like to start with something else. So my lower session, it would be kind of like your normal calf raise. And that's kind of the first set will be like 2 reps in reserve. And then the second set would be kind of like match the first set, and then you'd go to failure on the last set.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like you're setting yourself like the first set, and then you are going to failure by like matching that set, which is like it's kind of like a lot to get your head around, but then
Yeah.
it does make sense. And then my next one would be a hamstring curl, 1 set 6 to 10 at 1 rep in reserve, and then 2 sets at 8 to 12. The first set going 2 initial reps in reserve, and then the next set to failure. So it's kind of like I'm always going to failure, but just not straight away. And it means that I get kind of like 2 quality sets, and then the last set I'll like go to failure.
Yeah.
And then kind of like my pendulum, or now it's a swing squat, would be like 1 5 to 8 at 1 rep in reserve, then the next set to failure. So to be honest, I think as it is right now, as like a simplified version, is like my first set, I just won't take any like forced reps. I won't like take that like 1 extra rep, but then my second set I will. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much the only difference. And I think this method works because I know what failure is. But I think for some people that kind of haven't experienced training to failure, doing it would be very different because they don't actually know like the exact point to stop. Whereas for me, like I know when I've got 1 more rep, I know when I've got 2 more reps. It's kind of like you'd be the same. Like if you were gonna do it, you would know what rep would be failure before you were gonna do it.
Yeah.
So it is quite nice. And from a recovery standpoint, like I do find that like I am recovering a lot better, and I can go into my sessions like without feeling completely battered.
Yeah.
And like since I've had this approach, I've never really been like deep in the gutters because we
Mm.
call a deload after like 8 weeks routinely, whereas before I would just wait until I got completely in the gutters and then yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
it is interesting because it is just so different, and like, well, it is different, but it's not. It's just
Yeah.
a way of doing it. And I think also that kind of highlights that a lot of people think that RAR is like,
It's portrayed so negatively.
it is, because they either think it's not trying as hard or it's just so different. And like you've kind of just portrayed, like you're still training to failure. You're just
Yeah.
managing things better for you based on like your fatigue and like what works better for you. And that's ultimately like what it comes down to with different training approaches, is like just play around with like different things and see what works better. Like you've trained like consistently to failure before and you've seen how that works. And then you've tried this, and whilst it was maybe different to begin with, you're seeing like this actually kind of works well for you. And there's different ways that like everyone can do different things. That's a balance between like what works well and what you enjoy. And you can also flutter between the two if you wish to do so. Like you don't have to, like, I need to do this now. And like you did with your approach, like you trialed different things and you found that happy medium that works well for you. I think that any coach that wants to work with you in the best way possible will always work with the athlete, especially like yourself, when you are experienced, like you know what you're doing. That feedback and your like understanding your experience of that is so important, so that you guys can like find what works well. And that's always the answer to like best progress, a happy prep, a happy bodybuilding experience, is like coach athlete working together to find something that works really well.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think like the communication is something that like I know that like I just needed to communicate the fact that I actually wasn't enjoying the training because of the fact that I love the feeling of going to failure. So that's how we came up with this like happy medium where I could still go to failure but not be in the gutters. And I think for a lot of people, like a lot of people will try something, not like it, then leave and move on and keep jumping. But like it kind of just reiterates the fact that like if you're going to be working with a coach, like you need to express how you feel and why. And I think like that's like one thing that like I do carry myself, like I will just say I feel like this because, and then your coach, like you said, and like you probably do with your athletes, you can kind of understand why they're feeling that way and then make the adjustments to find something that works for that individual person. Like it's not just like my favorite bodybuilder trains this way, so I have to train this way, because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No, and it's not even this. I've seen this athlete on Instagram and they do this and they look like that. They've won this, so surely I need to do that. It's like, no. Let's bring it back in. But like you've put it so well there, is that it's not just I don't like this, this doesn't work. It's okay, why? Like, why
Yeah.
does that work? Why don't you like it? And that's the like key to that communication, like taking that to the next level. And you've done a great job with that, like with your training. And like you said, I think you said this was like a reason that kind of like brought you to 3DMJ in the first place, is that they do a really good job at managing around people's lifestyles and like different things that work for them, and not necessarily having more of a flexible approach, but it's having an adaptive approach, I would say.
Yeah.
Specifically with like the way they do like the macro tracking, which like you have always done macros.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people will think that if you're in a prep, you have to follow a meal plan, which some people really benefit from it. They really do.
Yeah.
Some people don't need that. And you're a really good example of somebody who's never followed a meal plan, but has a great understanding of nutrition and also manages things really well. And you've done that from like your first prep to this prep, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you've always found that just works better for you.
Yeah, like for me, like I've always had macros, like we said, but like in this prep especially now, like I've made myself a meal plan where like each day I'll have the same, just because of like an ease with work perspective. But like I think because I've always done macros, it definitely helped in the off season just to make like flexible choices. So like one day I'll be like, oh, I'll have potatoes. The next day I'll be like, fancy rice, you know? And for me, like that just worked. In my last prep, I tracked macros, but like a little bit differently because my nutritional knowledge wasn't really there. So I kind of like I would put in things that maybe shouldn't have been in there, but they fit in my macros and they made me happy. So like I got the job done, but maybe not as like clever. Whereas now like my diet is like a bodybuilder's diet, because my food is quite low at the moment. So like I need to be clever with it. Like I need like carbs around training and training for, and like I do understand it a lot better, but I don't think I'd be in this position unless I track macros the last like 4 or 5 years. So yeah, like for now, like I do have set meals, but like if one day I'm like, oh, I really want potatoes, like I can make that change, and like mentally that would be fine for me. Whereas I think some people would like really struggle with that,
Yeah.
like a change.
Yeah. And it's like, even if you're like on a meal plan, like this is what a lot of people get confused is like you can make a like for like swap. Like if you want to swap your potatoes and have rice, if you want to have a bagel, like you can do that. But like some people really struggle with that. And I think that that's actually why building up the skill of like you've done, where you've actually understood your own knowledge and being able to get better at tracking macros, does really, really help. But it kind of takes time. And
Yeah.
if you look back now at your first prep, and there were maybe some things that you probably could have done like a little bit better, but that's part of the process, isn't it? And you just get better and better at learning that. But yeah, it's nice that is obviously in a good spot for you now. And I think just with like all the things that we've spoken about with, you know, your approach with nutrition, your approach with training, and your approach with life, it will be really nice for a lot of people to follow your prep and know these things that kind of go on in the background, and see that you can do things in a different way to maybe what a lot of other people portray as gospel, and like still make really good progress and still have a really good time. I think your career as well is probably the biggest thing above anything else. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that like it would be difficult for you to be a vet and do all of these other things. But I know I see it sometimes in people saying, you know, it's going to be difficult for you to be a bodybuilder if you're doing, you know, this and that. I mean, people even say it's difficult to be a coach and be a bodybuilder. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, like you can't be both. Like, come on.
Like, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that in terms of like the role that has maybe played in your process. Like, has that ever been something that people have said to you?
Yeah, like kind of like I haven't had that many saying it in like a it's mainly my parents. They're like, no, come on, like you can only do one thing, and like you like why are you doing that as well, and things like that. And I definitely think kind of like you, like people think like they can't do both. For me, like I always knew like I could do both because I'm just that sort of person where for me they actually go like hand in hand. Like I like bodybuilding is like my savior from like my vet life, and then my vet life is like my distraction from like my bodybuilding life. And without one or the other, like the other one is rubbish. And finding like the balance where they both work well has definitely taken time. But like now I've got like a good balance. Like they do definitely go hand in hand. But I think for some other people where they're still finding that balance, when kind of like sometimes they put too much effort into one and the other one slips, and then they get really stressed, or they put too much kind of effort into uni and then their gym goes to rubbish and they're like, I can't do both. And like I think it's more then it's just time of finding like that sweet spot that people find difficult, and that's when quite a lot of people will stop one or the other. They think like, oh, like, so I've failed so many exams in my life. Like I've messed up my first year of A levels, I failed second year at uni, and that was because my balance was wrong. But that didn't mean that I couldn't do one or the other. It just meant that I had to shift that balance. And it definitely just took kind of like time and failing to make me realize like, oh, actually, like this needs more attention at this point and things like that. And so it's not necessarily the fact that like you can't do both, it's that you will mess some things up sometimes, but you just need to like adjust. I think that's like the most important like message that I could give to someone doing like two different things. It's just like it will never always be perfect.
No, that's amazing. That, like, I mean, I think I saw something somewhere about the A levels, but I didn't actually know that you didn't pass your exams in your second year of uni as well.
Yeah, so I my first year of A levels, like I completely flopped them, and my teacher was like, "Yeah, you're never gonna be a vet, or you need to quit swimming." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing either of those. Like, I'm gonna be a vet, and I'm gonna keep swimming." Obviously, I ended up stopping swimming, but I was always like, "I am gonna be a vet, even if you tell me I'm not." And then got into vet school, and then first year fine. Second year, I did too much sport, so that was the year where I was trialing everything. That was the year I tried to do the first prep, got ill, got ill, tried to do the first prep, literally like messed up my exam. My head was gone. I was in a really, really bad spot mentally, failed my exams. And then I spent the whole summer, that was actually the summer that I got Zeus, and I'm not gonna lie, that dog saved me, because like it's not you obviously know how much I love Zeus on social media, but he literally kind of came at the moment where like everything was in the gutters. I spent the whole summer sat in this room with Zeus revising for my resits, did my resits at the end of summer for second year, passed them. Then like third, fourth, fifth year, I was like, wow, like I found like a happy place almost. Like
Yeah.
I like know how to revise in a way that like I don't get stressed. And anyway, that's probably like a whole another podcast. But like, yeah, it's definitely not kind of like, I do think social media portrays people in such a perfect light, and it's just not that simple. Like it's actually not. I'm not just this person that's amazing that can do two things. Like I've messed up plenty of times, and the same with sport. Like when I'm doing my exams, like yeah, bodybuilding does slip, and I'm okay with that now because it just has to like be that way. So yeah.
That's such a like a good way to put it, because a lot of people think that if they fail at something once, like that's it, then they're not
Yeah.
going to do it. And like you clearly said that you like pulled yourself out of that, and you like sat with Zeus and you revised and you kind of got yourself out of that hole, that place that you were in, and just cracked on, because ultimately you really wanted it. And I think that when you really want it, you can you will do like whatever it takes to make that happen. But like, did you have those moments where you were like, I'm really struggling, and like, how am I going to plow this? And was it a case of just kind of like sitting down with yourself and coming up with a plan to make it better, or did you find that time like quite difficult?
Yeah, like honestly, like that was like the worst year of my life, hands down. Like it was so difficult. And like at times I was like, I genuinely don't know how I'm gonna get through this. And then kind of like failing the exams was like the tip of the iceberg for the already like shit show of a year. Like it was almost like I was at that point where I was like, I don't actually know how many times I can stand back up. Like when you get knocked down once, fine, pick yourself back up. But when you like have a consecutive like knock down, knock down, knock down in a short space of time, like I genuinely was like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like how many times can one person get knocked down before like you genuinely like crumble? And I did, like I broke, like I was in, like I said, in mentally, I was completely just just the worst place ever. But now looking back, like that year was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because you learn so much about yourself when you fail. So same as like not winning a show or kind of failing like any other test, like you learn so much from failing. Like even though at the time you think like your whole world has come to like an end, like when you do actually realize how much of a hole you can dig yourself out of with just kind of like time and just being like kinder to yourself, like you're like, wow, like that's pretty crazy. And it did take time. I think when I failed my exams, my biggest fear was like everyone was disappointed in me. And like I cried like so much. Like I was just a mess basically. And then it kind of took a few days where I was like, you know what, like reminding yourself why you do things, and like I'm doing this degree because I love it. Like I'm doing this sport because I love it. And like why am I putting so much pressure on myself? And I think that was like the biggest thing for me, was changing like my perspective of pressure. And it's like all of this pressure was just me putting it on myself. And like, what am I getting from it? I was like, I've studied so much and I've got nothing from it. I've worked so hard and I'm getting nothing from it. Like, just stop putting pressure. And I think from that day, like, I just stopped putting pressure on myself. And it was just like, I revise because I want to learn, not because I want to pass an exam. And like, I train because I love it, not because I want to win a show, you know? And I think that's when I was like, wow, like, okay, I actually like learned to love my life again, which is kind of deep. But yeah, that's when I was just like,
and it's
yeah,
really, really like amazing to hear how you did come from that into being where you're at now. And like there's the short-term thing where it's like you can have your moments of feeling a bit down, and that's okay, but pull yourself out of it and like put things into a better perspective. Like you said, you know, see things like you're studying because you want to learn rather than you need to pass this or that. And it's the same thing with training, the same thing with so many other things. Like do your job because it's your passion and you love to do it, rather than this gives me money and I need to do this and it provides me stress. Like seeing all of these things from a different perspective, like will change your view on life. And you can do that in the short term, but the real change does come with just time, like you said.
yeah, definitely.
It's just more time doing it and more time getting better at it and maturing. And like over that time, you've gone from like being like an 18-year-old teenager to like becoming an adult, and like that is just maturity and just getting better. So like if anyone is at that point now, whether it be within bodybuilding, their career, within their personal life, if you're having lows, like use those lows as an opportunity for you to get better. Like you will come out of those and you will learn so much out of those experiences. And if you're going through those, like it's okay. Like
Yeah,
come out the other end.
it really is.
You're going to learn so much, and you're going to be in a position moving forwards where you will get after all those things if you continue to like have that desire, have that deep want, and see them in a positive way. And I think I massively appreciate you opening up about that as well, because I think, you know, I even will see you on Instagram and see like, wow, all these things you do are amazing. And I'm sure that even though I don't think it, I mean, I'm sure people will look at me like I look at other people and will think, you know, this and that, but everyone has these moments. And it makes us human to just kind of say those things and put them out there again. And I really appreciate you just opening up about it. And I know I could talk to you for like absolutely. So
Literally.
I will try and cap it to a close there, because I think you've just finished that on a really, really fantastic note. And I think that so many people will really appreciate, you know, following along your prep with that context and seeing everything you've done, obviously seeing what you're managing this year, but also knowing that that was maybe where you were a few years ago as well, which I think is really, really amazing. I know that I will for sure. So yeah, I really look forward to following along your prep. I'm sure so many people do as well. And if anyone wants to find Zena, you can find her on Instagram. I believe your @ is _ Dr Zena something. You can.
I think, do you know what? I don't even know where the underscore is.
That's
Dr.
really...
Is it Dr. Zena _ Yeah. I don't know.
I'll get the confirmation.
Hang on.
_ Dr.
There we go.
Oh,
that's bad, isn't it?
I actually think I got that right the first.
You did, yeah.
Okay, there we go. There's the confirmation. So if you want to find Zena, definitely give her a follow on Instagram. And obviously just a huge thank you to you for joining me on the podcast. I've really appreciated having you on as a guest. It's been really lovely to have a chat with you. I'm sure at some point in the future I'll get you back on and we can discuss all the things that happen in 2023 in the future, which will be fun. But yeah, thank you so much, Zena. Thank you so much to everyone for listening along. If you are listening on Spotify, please do give us a follow. That would be fantastic, and you can stay in tune with future episodes. And if you are listening on YouTube, if you can like and subscribe as well, that would be awesome. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back again with another episode next week.